Hello, and welcome to another Behind the Poems story. This is about the poems from my first collection, Between Hindsight and Foresight. I am really pleased to talk to you this week about a poem I'm quite proud of called The Eyes of Walls. Now, The Eyes of Walls is a kind of a tribute to my many visits to many different museums over time and my appreciation of those museums. So the concept behind The Eyes of Walls is that the life depicted within the paintings, whether it's portraiture or pastoral scenes or landscapes or wartime or horses or dogs or models, whoever or whatever is being captured in the painting is still alive. That life has been frozen in that moment, the same way photographs do it today. This idea that it's alive and it's looking back at us from the walls within museums, that it's seeing us as we see them. And because some of these paintings are hundreds of years old, some of them all have been around for 300, 400, whatever, and they've moved from country to country, they've moved from museum to museum, from private collections to public auction. Some of them have been damaged or been involved in battles or stolen during war. These paintings are, in and of themselves, somehow alive and looking at us at the same time that we're looking at them. And if you've ever been to a museum, especially in a portrait gallery, you know what I'm talking about. You know how it almost feels like they are looking back at us. The better the painting, the better the painter, the more lifelike the creation. But at the same time, this idea that they themselves contain some type of life is quite evocative to me. I think that I wrote this poem after my visit to the Wallace Collection in London. Now, the Wallace Collection is not quite as well known as some of the other museums within London, the Victoria and Albert, the British Museum, the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square. All of these museums are really quite beautiful and really quite wonderful, but there was something about the Wallace Collection that I found really endearing. It didn't feel overwhelming like the British Museum. The British Museum has so much that you can't spend less than 3 hours and really get any kind of sense of everything that's there. The Wallace Collection, you can go for the afternoon, you can spend an hour or 2 hours. Any amount of time that you spend there feels like enough because it's condensed. But that's not to say that it's a limited collection. There's tons and tons and tons of things to see at the Wallace Collection. But I found it very evocative to see some of the more famous paintings that they have and visit some of those gallery rooms where the paintings seem to have a kind of life, seem to be looking at me, not just in the sense of the famous Cavalier poem picture that is looking at you, or that is so 3D that you actually feel like, or it looks like the fabric has texture, that you could touch it and it would feel like a jacket or would feel like a shirt. Well, don't touch it because you'll set off alarms. But the idea that there is life within the painting that has been captured and has been watching humanity, watching it for hundreds of years, is really evocative to me going around a museum. And so I also started to play with, in this poem and thinking about that concept, whether or not that kind of captured life would be strictly voluntary. That, some of these paintings, some of these lives and people and animals and landscapes may not have wanted to be captured and put on display for centuries. And now, having visited other places, older places, where the paintings and the scenes being depicted, some of the places, even in the landscapes, don't even exist anymore. And so the idea that it wasn't strictly voluntary for them to be captured in this way becomes more evocative, that they're almost on the other side of the painting, kind of beating their hands at the canvas saying, let me out, let me out. But for the ones that don't exist anymore, maybe they didn't want to be captured in it, but now it's the only way that they continue to survive, continue to live, is quite interesting. There is also a further idea of these paintings watching us, the secrets that they would have seen. When you're in an art gallery, you know, not everybody's paying attention to what everybody else is saying. You're supposed to be paying attention to the artwork on the walls or the sculpture on the stands, or, you know, reading the little blurbs that they give you about the artist and thinking about the artist, or listening to your headphones with the, you know, audio guide, or listening to a tour guide. You're supposed to be paying attention to anything except the other people with you. And a lot of these private collections would have been seeing family and dignitaries and heads of state and all these other kind of things for a long time. So imagine the secrets that these paintings have overheard. Imagine the stories that the paintings could tell about the things that have passed before them, before their eyes, on the wall. Kind of like the fly on the wall idea, but more active, more like a kind of a living history, that what these paintings have seen could be really crazy, could be secretive, could be adventurous. You know, if they get stolen in war, you know, they're traveling with soldiers, or they're traveling with an invading army. How interesting and adventurous would it be if they could tell the things that they have seen and the things that they've done and the places they've gone? I think that this also carries on from an idea that was in a film that I saw, a film called The Red Violin. Now, it's a kind of obscure film that friends of mine got me onto when I was at university, where the main character of the film is actually the violin. That I'm not going to spoil anything from the film, but there is a reason why the violin almost has a life of its own. And as the violin passes from owner to owner, owning the violin impacts the owner's life. And we learn about big things that happen and small things that happen just by following the life of the violin instead of the lives of the people that the violin interacts with. So it's a really interesting film, but it got me, it probably started this idea, which has come to fruition in The Eyes of Walls, where the idea of objects having a life of their own, and objects impacting the people that own them, and objects seeing us as much as we see them. So when you go to a museum, wave hi to the paintings, make sure that you're polite, make sure that you don't whisper any secrets in front of them, because who knows, maybe I'm right, and maybe in 100 years or so they'll figure out how to get all that information out of something that has been an observer and an eye, a set of eyes on the walls of many museums over the centuries. I hope you appreciate the stories that I keep telling. I hope that you are interested, and please do feel free to share the videos. Please feel free to share the book to anybody you think might like poetry. Between Hindsight and Foresight is available on Amazon in both the US and the UK. Do feel free to message me or comment under the videos if there is another poem that I haven't talked about yet that you would like to see, or if you have any ideas for future poems, because I am working on another collection as we speak. So hopefully I will see you next week for another story of the behind the poems in Between Hindsight and Foresight. Have a good evening.